Well, we're 24 hours away from the Astros taking on the Seattle Mariners and looking to get back into first place where they belong, top of the division. We've got a special guest with us, Mr. Scott Braun from Foul Territory. We're going to talk about the Astros, the second half, and where we see this team headed. Let's get started right now.
Jainer Diaz, this is Locked On Astros.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Astros, your daily Astros podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric the Man Huysman and Brett H-Town Wheelhouse Chancey.
We are Locked On Houston Astros. We hope that you join us for a daily Locked On Astros podcast. My name is Eric Huysman. You can find me on X at Eric Talkstros. Find the show at Locked On Astros, your team every day. Brett, where can I find you at?
They can find me at H-Town Wheelhouse on X, Instagram, and TikTok. They can find me at Stros411 on Facebook and on X. They can also find me at Back to the Bullpen on X, YouTube, and on Instagram. I'm always positive, always Stros. And Scott is in the house from Foul Territories. Scott, tell everybody where they can find you, sir.
Eric and Brett, great to talk to you both. Looking forward to this and answering any questions that you and, of course, any fans have. You can find me at Scott Braun on basically any platform. But more importantly, check out at Foul Territory TV if you're on Twitter, at Foul Territory Show if you're on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and basically anywhere that you can find shows or social media clips. Also on wherever you get your podcasts. We have a network of about 6 shows now, and we are on national television on Valley Sports and Marquee. So we are just about everywhere if you're looking for baseball coverage, and there's about 10 of us. I'm the non-player host along with Ken Rosenthal, who's our insider, but then we've got about 10 former players, including Cam Maben might be a familiar name for some fans, but many others, AJ Pierzynski, Todd Frazier, and on, Eric Kratz, and Trevor May was just with us at All-Star. So I appreciate the time, guys. I'm looking forward to diving into some Stros because I've been a believer since day one, even when times were tough.
Well, that you kind of took away my opportunity, Brett, to say, are you related to, or I was going to introduce him as Ryan Braun, but you kind of took away that. But guys, this episode of Locked On Astros is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even the rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. Go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube. Make us your first listen. Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Check out the Locked On Astros podcast and go ahead and hit that little red button down there that says subscribe. So speaking of Ryan Braun, did you get a lot of people asking you when you first came up doing the media stuff that are you related to Ryan Braun?
I did. Yeah, and it's been a minute. So my first full-time job at MLB was with the network when it was a baby network at the time. And I did get questions like that somewhat frequently. And the answer is no. I know Ryan. We have done a little quick check just between us back and forth to see if there were any relatives. The answer was no. We're close in age, and also we both went to University of Miami. So I can understand looking at all of those connections and thinking there's something there, but there is not. I know that he had, a checkered past based on the PED situation, but I know him, from being around him in baseball quite a few times. Cool guy, nice guy. So I have good things to say about him as a personality.
And I'm a huge Miami fan. I had no idea you went to the university. The only time I've gotten to watch them play was several years ago. They came to NRG and played against the University of Houston Cougars. And I was wearing my Miami gear, and one of my coaches from our high school from Crosby was a U of H, was all Southwest Conference, old school guy. He was like yelling at me, like, why are you wearing the green and the yellow? And I'm like, it's all about the U. And so I've been a Miami fan because I'm a Florida native originally. I was actually born in Florida. So that's really cool that you have that tie. The Astros, right? The Astros, Scott. I almost said Ryan. See, Eric got me.
That was Scott, my whole goal.
You got him.
Exactly. Like your take on this Astros team. I mean, coming into the year, everybody expected them just to kind of keep going as they were, and boom, injuries, 7-19. It's been a tumultuous year, and yet they find themselves right now in the heat of a division race.
Yeah, I am not surprised. Maybe the surprise is that they got back this quickly. I know they're opening up the series in Seattle And if they beat them here to start the second half of the season, they're already back in first place in the AL West. So while I'm not surprised about them getting back to normal here, I would say I am surprised about the AL West being really down this year, if you think about it. I knew the A's were going to be terrible along with everyone else. I actually knew that the Angels were going to be terrible along with probably many other people, but that's where it stops. For me, I absolutely love Seattle's pitching. You'd be dumb not to, and it has performed up to expectations. I thought their offense was going to be pretty similar to last year, just with different results. It's actually way worse than it was last year, and that's what's enabled Houston to play catch up. And then, of course, obviously the typical World Series hangover from the Rangers winning it last year. And then the bats, though, sometimes it's the pitching that falls off for a World Series team, and they're waiting for some guys to come back. So anyway, for Houston, I know they start 7-19. There were a lot of problems for them early on, a lot of close losses, and then it starts to come together. You start to see the offense come around, especially since Kyle Tucker went down. Tucker was a one-man show, and I like to look at guys like that carrying a team early on, because where would they be without Kyle Tucker at the start of the season? You know, they might have lost 4 or 5 more games. I know he's still leading in categories like wins above replacement, even though he's been missing for more than a month. So I wasn't concerned. On Foul Territory, we have Eric Kratz, who's a former Houston Astros player and is still pretty connected with some guys and some people in the organization, and he didn't really feel too much concern either. So we were pumping them up as a team that should be fine. They just have to dig themselves out of a hole. I mean, if you think about it, last year, they barely kind of snuck in as well. It's happened for them in several of the previous seasons. I know even the COVID season, they ended up looking like a pretty decent playoff team after looking like a super mediocre team, but it was only a month of baseball. So I think they're going to make it into the playoffs, and I think they're going to be a pain to deal with like they always are. And even though the relievers, the high leverage relievers, had a slow start to the season, stuff wise, they don't really look down to me. So I'd be pretty concerned about facing Houston in the postseason if they fix the rotation, and they should get a first baseman. I like Singleton, but I think there are enough first basemen available for them to make it a real plus.
So looking at the first baseman available, which one you think would be the best target for the Astros? I know Christian Walker would be the best name, but there's no guarantee that the Diamondbacks are going to trade him. Which guy, if you were Dana Brown, would you go out and get?
Yeah, I don't think the Diamondbacks are going to make moves on that front. They went pretty hard in the offseason. They're coming off their World Series appearance, and they're really close. So they would have to fall off. You'd have to have a pretty poor 2 weeks coming up for them. I mean, the dream, if you want me to go all the way on the offensive side, is Vladdy Jr. I don't think he'll necessarily be traded, but I don't know what's going on in Toronto. That team is finishing up their winning window opportunity. They've got Vladdy and Bo that are going to be free agents in a season and a half. If I was Toronto, I would be trading Vladdy right now. I'd basically do this over the next 2 weeks. Okay. Hey, here's our final best offer. Are we going to figure out having you here long-term? And if not, I would trade him. It doesn't sound like they're going to trade him, but that's the dream scenario. After that, I think you're looking at a next tier that includes Isaac Paredes, who was just named an all-star, right? Who was just out in Arlington where we were. I think he's a fantastic bat who can play first base and third base. He is, if I had to check, I like to go off, say, OPS plus to level out the league in the ballpark. He's probably in like the 130 range. Has a lot of pull power. I think he'd be great in Houston. And the fact that he can play first and third means if they do lose Bregman in the offseason, you've got team control of an all-star who can flip over to third base once you patch up first. So that would be next on my list. I know they've tried out Yainer. They're going to maybe think about using him there a little bit, Yainer Diaz, but I don't think that's the move for them in the second half. And then we can get to the next tier, like an Andrew Vaughn, I think could be in consideration. A Yandy Diaz is not out of the question either for the Rays. If the Rays do decide to sell, they look to sell guys that have a couple years left of control. I think Yandy fits that bill as well and would be great with the Astros. And then lastly, if he's healthy enough, Cody Bellinger, if the Cubs fall off. So I feel like those are mostly pretty upper echelon bats that would be significant contributors. What do you guys think?
I think if you bring in Yanni Diaz, you just got to make sure him and Fromber on opposite sides of the dugout. Just joking there. But, I think this, though, whenever I look at the market, whether it's first baseman, whether it's pitcher, is who do the Astros have to give back in return? And right now, I don't think guys like I don't think Chas McCormick has much trade value. I think Jake Myers has absolute trade value. But why would you trade a guy who's got the third outs above outs above average. One of the best defensive center fielders, has really, projected higher in his offensive ability. I actually called him to have his offensive breakout year this year. But right now, I just think pitching, because it is projected that Ronel Blanco is going to hit 170.1 innings at the end of the season. To me, you've got to get a starting pitcher in. That's where I'm at. My whole counter to the whole, like, I want the Astros to get whoever they can get, but it's like, who do we have that other clubs also can't offer? Like the Orioles, they still have a ton to offer. There are contenders, and Scott, you can probably speak to this. There are way more buyers this year than what there typically is at this time, and I think that makes it more difficult for the Astros.
Yeah, it does. And I want to make this point clear to your fans. Starting pitching is number 1 and 2 on the list. You could make a case for first base at 3 if we're getting greedy. And I do understand the situation with the Astros farm system. It's definitely, I don't know where Baseball America has them right now. My guess would be in the low 20s in terms of team rankings. And of course, the names that you're bringing up, I'm not considering by any means, because you're looking at prospects to make trades, right? For the most part, you're not going to shake up your major league roster unless it's really glaring or really needed. So I'm looking at the minor league side of things when venturing into the trade world. And that's why also even a trade for Vladdy Jr. probably doesn't make sense. I don't know if they have the prospect capital. And you're right. Teams like the Dodgers and the Orioles, who are powerhouse clubs, who have a lot of needs, are going to be able to outbid them. That even has to do with the starting pitching. Now, there are a number of names. It's just a matter of who they can acquire towards the top of that list. But I mean, if I'm making a list of starting pitching available, I can probably easily come up with 10 to 12 names, depending on who ends up being a seller. Names towards the top, if someone like Jack Flaherty is showing that he's healthy and over, I think it was the back issue that he was dealing with towards the end of the first half. Eric Fetty's been a big name who can eat innings and looks like a playoff starter. Guys, I also try and delineate starting pitching by depth starting pitching and by starters that I trust in a playoff game. I think there's a huge difference in that world. So in terms of starters in a playoff game, there's probably going to be maybe 3 to 4 names available that you feel really comfortable with. I think Tyler Anderson could fit that bill if the Angels aren't stupid and realize that they need to trade players away that are even under team control for next season. I think he could be one of the top arms available. Jamison Taillon for the Chicago Cubs, even though there's still some time left for him. The Astros aren't going to be in play, I think, for someone like Garrett Crochet. He's going to cost too much. I'm not even sure if they're definitely going to trade him, but if they do, it's just not a name that fans should think about. But they just need to fill innings. Like you mentioned, Blanco's target, I think they're hoping that it lands more in the 150, 160 range so they don't wear them out by the time they get to the postseason. Mm-hmm. So that's where you're looking for depth. And depth names could include guys like who the Rockies have, Cal Quantrill, who still could maybe start a playoff game. He's looked pretty good in the first half. It's hard to see exactly how things play out for a pitcher like that until he gets out of the Colorado Rockies situation. Austin Gomber fits that for innings. Kyle Hendricks, maybe for innings. I know, he's been a little shaky, but when he came back, he certainly fixed some things. That's a name that you could throw out there. A bigger name that I think is definitely going to be dealt, but probably is out of their price range because I think he's going to be popular, is Yusei Kikuchi. Zach Eflin can pitch a playoff game. So I'm coming up with quite a few options here. Montas, if the Reds fall off, Luis Severino, if the Mets fall off. I think both of those guys probably don't end up becoming available. But one other name that I think kind of sneaky, because it's usually not a thing, but again, probably not, something that Houston could acquire. Jesus Luzardo was one of the bigger names mentioned the first half. He's hurt, but there were some reports that the Marlins would consider trading him because he's expected to come back in mid-August. So anyway, out of all of the names, guys, that I just mentioned, I don't know if the Astros have the prospect capital to pull off most of those deals, because I think if we're ranking how many teams need starting pitching and what their prospect situation looks like, the Astros are pretty low on that list, going for Verlander last year and giving up 2 pretty premier prospects, the hits they've taken for the draft pick penalties. It's just putting them in somewhat of a tough spot right now.
Yeah, it takes 2 teams to tangle, and we'll go and continue this conversation in a second.
This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Get the app today or go to the website. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities that you've always wanted to secretly learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rivals cities. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find the perfect stay, even in LA, New York, Boston, Toronto, Tampa. Who knows? The sky's the limit. From hotels that overlook stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this season. I've used Booking.com this summer, and it was a breeze. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today at Booking.com on the site or at Booking.com, the app. Booking.yeah. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, and yours truly. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to engage in daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, you actually just pick against the numbers. You pick more or less in 2 to 6 different categories, and you watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the action with your friends and become a part of the PrizePicks community today. You can win 100 times your money, turn $10 into $1,000. It's fun. It's amazing. It's exciting. Caitlin Clark is playing. Jordan Alvarez is playing. The sporting world is heating up with the Olympics coming up. So if you want to get in on the action, download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for your first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Guys, thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day. Whether it's on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to us. Give us a big fat thumbs up. Make us your first listen. Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Check out the Locked On Astros podcast. Go and check out Michael Connor with the Locked On Astros podcast as well. He does a great job. So, Scott, I know that you talked about what the Astros need to get at the trade deadline. What if Jim Crane tells Dana, you're not getting anything at the trade deadline? You no trades for you. Where would the Astros go? How far will they go this season?
Why would he say that?
I know he won't, but let's just say.
Yeah, that is so un-Jim Crane-like.
I know it is.
He's done a great job of allowing his GM to be aggressive at trade deadline. Right. And hey, that's what works. I mean, go all the way back to Verlander and that acquisition and how that changed really the complexion of the franchise, I think, for a long time to put them, in this winning situation. If they do absolutely nothing, I don't know if they make the playoffs, but that's why I'm talking about them as if they're a playoff team, because I'm expecting them to at least fill rotation depth, and I can see them acquiring a first baseman. So ideally for the team, it's 2 starters and a first baseman. Yeah, if they do 0, if they come up completely empty, which does happen from some teams, I just don't think it will be Dana Brown in this organization. This is just not their thing. Then yeah, I'll say they don't make the playoffs if we get to that point. We had that a lot last year. I actually think last year was a tougher market to make trades in than this year. I think this year that storyline's getting overblown. If you actually look right now at how many teams are not in a great spot, I know the National League is really bunched up. I do still think you're going to get a few more sellers that emerge as the fringe teams that are going to look at the next 2 weeks and say, unless we go on a run where we win, 10 of 12 games, they're going to sell. It's hard to make a case for a club like the Chicago Cubs. I know they don't have a ton to sell, but they have some to sell. And from some of the teams that are bottom feeders, they have a lot to sell. So I wouldn't kind of undersell the fact that there are quite a few assets to be had. I mean, the White Sox are going to sell away like half their team. The Marlins are going to sell away like half their team. So I would just keep an eye on all of that and expect that Dana Brown is going to make, I would put the over under at probably 2.5. I would put for how many moves. One of them could be a smaller move, but 2.5 moves for major league players.
So you're saying,
hey, before I forget, Scott and Brett, did they change the rules this year where the Angels can't do what they did last year, where they dumped a whole bunch of players? So
the dump deadline, we called it on Foul Territory.
That was insane. Scott, when I saw that, and I saw that the Angels really could have traded Ohtani as a rental and gotten some pretty good talent back for that, I think. Not just pretty good, but I'm kind of understating on purpose because they were like, no, we're going to make this playoff run. I'm like, y'all are the Angels. This isn't 2011 or whenever y'all went to the World Series back 2002. I don't remember when. Like, I think they went to one playoff series when Trout was a rookie. And since then, they've pretty much been irrelevant. But look, I think what the Astros do have in their favor is they do have a Seattle offense that is inconsistent. We do have a Rangers team that, yes, they did win 2 out of 3 out of Houston. They didn't beat the brakes off the Astros, but I think the Astros are going to lean on their veteran leadership. From what Sean Dubin said, this clubhouse, they lean on guys. And Eric actually asked him, what is the best advice you've ever gotten from Justin Verlander? And Justin Verlander basically said, don't ride the roller coaster. Don't get too high. Don't get too low. Just move on. Like go with it. Don't get too wrapped up in the moment of what happens. And he said that's really been key for this club, is that we don't get too down on ourselves. We don't get too high on ourselves, but we know what we're capable of. And I asked him, so are you saying that you guys have not even played your best baseball yet? And he goes, I like that. He goes, we haven't. We can still be better. And are you hearing anything about Kyle Tucker coming back? I mean, I know he's walking around, the clubhouse. I know he's not, he doesn't have a fracture or a broken leg or anything like that, but this bone bruise is intense, apparently.
Yeah, it is. Actually, link it, not the same injury, but to Max Muncy, who was on our show today, and he's been out for a while with an oblique, and usually it's about a month, and now it's been 2 for him, and it sounds like it'll be at least 1 more. Not every injury is exactly the same. He was explaining how it's like a much more severe oblique injury, and clearly that's the case for Kyle with his particular injury. So I see what you guys see. I see the quotes too, that he said, I can't do everything normally right now. So I think they're going to slow play it with him, and you have to. I think he'll definitely come back at some point this season, but it doesn't sound like it's anytime soon. And it's definitely a lot more missed time than anticipated. I guess the one way that I can answer your question differently, Eric, is if they don't acquire anything, then everything has to go right. So Kyle Tucker needs to come back somewhat soon.
Right.
And then it's more on the pitching side. That's the problem. They're doing math at the deadline. They go, how many innings do we need to fill for the rest of the season? And how many arms do we trust? I think they have 5 starting pitchers that are healthy right now on their 40-man roster. And that's a problem. There are many guys that are pegged to come back, but the injury updates haven't been great. Obviously, McCullers has been out for such a long time. I don't think it's worth mentioning right now. I know he went through another setback. The Luis Garcia setback was pretty concerning because I felt like he was the guy that was on the mend. And then Verlander's going to come back too, but guys, this is where age is a factor. He's going to come back, but when you do go down with an injury at that age and you have so many miles on your arm, it just takes a little bit more time to come back. So I think none of those updates have been great right now. And that's where the concerns lie. Obviously, they lost Urquidy Javier in France for the year. So I'm like, Hunter Brown, Ronel Blanco, I feel really good in terms of the quality that you're going to get from them while they're on the mound. But we know how quickly things can change. They're already in code red mode, and that's where I look at last offseason that just passed through and say, as good as it looked, and as much as you talked about other guys kind of on the mend like Garcia and McCullers coming back, they probably could have added another depth arm or 2 to put them in a better situation. Now you put yourself in a place where you have to make a deal, a trade, and that's a problem. It's just getting to the playoffs, because then you shorten everything, right? Then they pick 3 or 4 guys, which they already have. I mean, you can already make a case for JV and Ronel and Hunter starting playoff games. So you feel good there as long as JV comes back well. I feel really good about that big 3. And then I feel great about the back end of the bullpen. It's just this marathon here, which they'll fix. I'm confident about it, but it can't be from young arms. And I don't know what the timetable is for Jake Bloss right now either, but this has to get fixed, even if it's just number 5 starters that help to fill the void for them.
Right.
Well, Bloss is back. He made a start. But
he is back right before the break. Okay.
Yes.
I missed that.
So I think he pitched 4 innings or
4 innings.
4 innings,
4 strikeouts. And then, there's another name. And if we're talking Blue Jays earlier, Gausman would be phenomenal. I mean, I would love to get Kevin Gausman over here. I mean, that dude can absolutely shove on the mound, but then again, you're talking what do they need? And I really think the Astros, it's important to them that they not only get back to the ALCS for an 8th year in a row, but I really think they want to get to the World Series. Like, okay, we made it to the ALCS last year and then just got embarrassed in game 6 and 7. I was at that. So I was at game 5 of the ALCS, and then I was at game 7. And let me tell you, I have never been a more reverse of emotions in those 2 games. In watching that team, and you just knew that that team was done. Like mentally, they were just they were tanked. And so I think that Jim Crane has it in him to go get somebody, because he's the ultimate competitor, I think. And he's gotten a lot of shade for some different things. The Abreu thing, Abreu's gone. People aren't really talking about that anymore. But I like the Astros if they put themselves in a position. You know, Scott, the Phillies, I think, are going to be our National League representative, and I would love an Astros-Phillies rematch from 2022.
Yeah, it would be fun. Gossman's a good name too, because one thing that they can do that some other teams can't is take on money. He's got quite a bit of money left on that contract, which I think runs through either next year or the year after. So
right.
If the Blue Jays do decide to make a move like that, they don't have to mess around. They can take on all of the money. Or you would think, although they didn't do that with the Justin Verlander trade, right? Which probably cost them a prospect. You probably, don't have to get rid of both. What did they give up? It was Gilbert and Clifford, right? In that trade. You probably can get away with just one of those players and then a lower level prospect if you took on all of the money. So I'm not sure exactly what their desire is, because I do know they generally like to stay under that luxury tax number. I think they're super close to it from what I remember coming into the season. You guys are more.
The Astros are really close to the second luxury tax threshold. They're like $4 million away, if I remember correctly.
So I don't know how much they care about that. If they don't, this is the way that you can kind of swing some power around in terms of making a trade and not having to give up all of the names that you'd be concerned about, or really just competing, right? So if the Blue Jays say, hey, we want to trade Kevin Gausman, and some other teams are trying to say, cool, but you have to like pay a little money down, the Astros shouldn't have to be in a situation like that. Technically, most teams shouldn't have to be in a situation like that, but that's just the world we live in with how owners operate, especially during the season when they set a budget. But that is one way that you can try and figure out who the Astros would get. If you think that Jim Crane's going to be okay taking on pretty significant money, look at starters who cost a lot and see if they could keep up there. Because again, like you guys mentioned, I mean, if there's a name that the Orioles and Astros both want, Baltimore's getting that player.
Right.
Their farm system is still insane. And again, this doesn't have to do with major league talent, like maybe a Kerstad or something like that. But they've got 8 or 9 guys in the minor leagues that could be looked at as top 3 prospects on half the teams in the league. That gives you a lot of, a much bigger edge, I would say, over a team like Houston. I'm not trying to like talk down what they do have. I just don't know if they're, willing to move them. Again, you guys are probably better on them than I am, but I'm really good on the top 100-ish prospects. But Melton, I'm looking at like their BA list right now. Melton, Will Perfito is obviously already up with the big league club, but I guess could be in consideration.
Well, right. And I think the guys that clubs would go after that have a high value right now as far as future would be Luis Baez, Bryce Matthews, Blue Ball. These guys. Pedro Leon has been hitting out of his mind, and I mean, rumors are swirling that maybe he will get a chance to come up after the trade deadline. He's finally fixed some of the holes in his swing. He was your 2.1 million or 1.2 million when he signed international, bonus money. He's been in the system a few years. So the Astros do have some guys that are going to be dogs. And I think that they see being a part of this, but I have a hard time thinking that Dana Brown is going to let Bryce Matthews or even Baez go, because they are projected to have very, very good major league careers, and they want them to stay in Houston.
Yeah. Dana Brown's a scouting guy too, right? Like there's a balance here. I think he's going to be aggressive, but he also is one of the best talent evaluators in the sport for a long time. Some of the work that he did in Atlanta was incredible. So, I mean, he knows. He's got his list already. If he's smart, you circle 3 or 4 guys and you say, I believe that this is superstar potential. And if I want to keep the ball rolling in Houston, you have to hold on to guys like that. You have to have the balance at all times. Like, look at the Mets. They spent more than any team in baseball ever last year, and it was an utter disaster. And most of that had to do with lack of depth and lack of prospect talent. And they've quickly turn that around. There are quite a few really exciting young players on that side, but they have to do the same thing because guys are going to start to depart. Like there's, I would say almost no chance they keep Bregman and Kyle Tucker. I'm not sure what the direction is there. My guess would be Tucker, especially based off what Dana said last year about kind of guaranteeing that they'd keep him. But yeah, it's a difficult balance when you've been this good for so long to keep that going.
Yes, definitely. I do want to ask you something after the break about Justin Verlander and the 140 innings mark. Are the Astros worried about that? So just think about that for a second.
This episode is brought to you by SupplyHouse.com for all your plumbing, HVAC, and electrical needs. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled tradesmen, SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed full of helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/T-M and order plumbing and HVAC electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. You know I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down and we get fewer games, all the sports aren't really sporting the way that I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost and a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. Don't delay. It doesn't matter if you don't have enough to bet on. Think of ways to do it. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Guys, thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day. Whether it's on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to us. Make us first listen, Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Check out the Locked On Astros podcast and go ahead and find us on your Amazon Fire TV stick as well. Just search the free channels app. You can find out Locked On Astros and Locked On Astros podcast. So, Scott, before the break, I did ask you, Justin Verlander, he's at 57 innings this year. So he needs to get to 140 in order for that automatic contract to kick in, where the Mets will be paying for half of his salary for the next season, and he's got a guaranteed deal. Is this a big issue for the Astros? Are the Astros stressing this? Is Verlander stressing this? And if he doesn't meet that 140 inning mark, do you see him coming back to Houston?
I don't know about coming back if he's a free agent. I don't know where his head is at. But I'm not worried about the innings. I'm just trying to do some quick math here. Guys, do we have an updated timetable from him? I didn't see one anywhere, right? So that's proving the point here. If we don't, right, it's not like he's coming back in a week or two, right?
Right.
So if that's the case, now we're already into August. And
there's 66 games left about.
Yeah, we're not gonna make it. I mean, 57. He's got 90-ish innings to go.
He's got to go 10 innings per start.
Half. Yeah,
he needs 83.
Yeah, 83 in a second half, but it's not even a full second half. So let's say he comes back August 15th. You have 6 weeks. No way.
So let's say he gets 6 starts. He needs to do 13 innings per start.
Yeah. Even if he gets 8 starts, right? Because you're getting more than a start a week. You're still not getting there. I mean, 8 starts times 7 is 56. We're not even close, right? Mm-hmm. So he would have to be back in the next week or two. So I would say we can kill that. And I definitely don't think he's worried about that. He's dumb rich, so it's not a problem. And he's going to get paid in free agency anyway. Who knows? Knowing him, he still wants to pitch for years. He probably will sign a 2-year deal. So
So
I think all is calm there. But as far as where his head's at, it's hard to know. I mean, sure, I could see him going back there, but I think, if I had to guess right now, maybe a 25% chance, and maybe a little bit less, only because I think the Astros might have to concern themselves about some other areas of covering money. And that especially goes to Kyle Tucker. Are they going to give him extension money? And if they are, that's going to tie up another big chunk that goes along with the Altuves and Jordans of the world.
And see, that's what I was going to talk to you about, both Bregman and Tucker. I think Bregman would be a cheaper, shorter term option because he's a little bit older. Tucker will demand more years. It's kind of been speculated that he doesn't really necessarily want a 10-year deal, that he would take a 7-year deal, but will Crane do that? And what's interesting, and just throw a little curveball, the Astros released their 2025 schedule and they released wallpaper with it. And one of the wallpaper icon for the August month of 2025 is Alex Bregman. And I'm like, are they sending us subliminal messages? But, the bottom line is this. I've always said this, Scott, and I want to get your take on this. If there's one guy that you break the mold for, it's Kyle Tucker. He's the guy that you pay. He's the guy that you try to keep here long term. He's the guy that you want to stay here and be here his whole career, like Jose Altuve.
Yeah, I agree. No doubt about it. I mean, that's the guy that you circle if you can pull it off. We're just getting really close to free agent land. And the closer you get, the more you get the itch. We'll see. Hopefully Kyle is 100% when he comes back this year, but I don't even know if that'll definitely be the case. That could scare all parties.
Right.
But he's the kind of guy that probably gets himself good to go in the offseason, even if there is a problem and he's not feeling great down the stretch. And he has a ridiculous free agent season next year. And then looks back at someone like Juan Soto, sees what he got, doesn't necessarily obviously get to that point, but it raises the bar for superstars because he could be the biggest name available after next season. So for me, I just start to look at situations and say, what's been offered? Why hasn't it been done yet when we're this close? I mean, we just brought this up with the Blue Jays. It's a year and a half. What's going on? We don't often get to the case where we're now just a year out and a deal gets done. So I'm not sure, but I think the way the season's playing out for him right now, who knows? It really could go either way. You could have a player that's going, damn, I got pretty hurt on an injury that sometimes is looked at as minor. Maybe I do take all this guaranteed cash and call it and put myself in a secure situation financially. Or maybe he says, I'm going to go prove it and show that I'm worth $400 million.
Right.
I know earlier in the show you mentioned the Rangers. They're coming off this World Series hangover. They're struggling a little bit this year. They're in third place right now. The Astros got off to a bad start as well, and they're turning things around. What were you thinking, especially when the Astros got swept to start the season against the Yankees? What was your thinking? Like, are the Astros done throughout the season? And what have been your thoughts as they have come back to contention?
No, I didn't think that. I just thought a lot of things weren't going their way. And probably what I would point to the most was the back end pitching. There were some early slumps from guys that don't do that very often. And that alone cost them probably a few games. And if that doesn't happen, then it's more like it's a bad start, but it's not a brutal start, the 7-19. So I don't know. I just didn't have the concern level. It was not high. I'm sure it was much higher, with you guys and even with your audience, because you're living and dying off every day. We cover the Astros a ton. I will say on Foul Territory, we cover this team a lot. I mean, they're really good every year. There are a lot of superstar names, and the storyline this year has been very interesting. So we're very dialed in on this.
If I can say this to kind of endorse you guys, because a lot of times if you're quote unquote labeled national media, a lot of Houstonians automatically assume, oh, they hate us. We've got the Houston versus everyone mentality. But Scott, you guys have really done a good job on Foul Territory. I mean, you cover the gamut. You guys report on the news, and you guys recognize, recognize game kind of thing. So y'all have done a great job. I can't honestly say that about every single person in the national media. Some of them, actually, one of them has me blocked because I called him out for being way too, I thought, hasty with the Astros. But I'll defend this team until
JH.
Hey, we don't, I'm not throwing names around. I'm trying to be professional. Okay. But I think sometimes there was almost just too much. Like it was like, okay, we get it, bro. Kind of thing. And you guys do a wonderful job. So definitely, if y'all haven't checked out the podcast, check it out, because you want to talk about a myriad of perspectives from former major league players. And of course, having Rosenthal on there, you just a phenomenal combination. So, keep up the good work there.
Thank you. And yeah, we brought, obviously we'll get one of you guys at some point soon too, but the broadcast team, we've had the whole team on there, Blummer and Callis and Julia. Chandler Rome is probably our most frequent. We tend to get quite a few athletic writers that join us, and Chandler will definitely tell it to you straight, right? That authenticity is number one with what we do. We want to make sure that whatever's going on, we want the real talk take or the real talk reporting on the situation, because there's nothing that we won't touch as far as a baseball topic on the show. So I appreciate that. But yeah, the concern level is not high. I mean, it's not going to be a cakewalk, and I feel like they had to use a lot of energy with some playoff vibes to the end of the first half. That's not always the worst thing in the world. Some teams get pretty complacent and then they kind of snooze into the playoffs. You have to have like this certain pitch that you hit heading into October, and the Astros definitely have that. They also just still have the core of players that only know how to win in big moments, right? And that matters too. And Tucker now can be part of that mix, and obviously Jordan, because they were kind of bred into that with the class before them of Bregman, Altuve, and guys that have left like Springer and Carlos Correa, but these are clutch players. So I think there is a difference where there are players that know how to deliver in those moments. I do believe in clutch. I believe that you can pick up on clutch in the big leagues, right? You can have a really bad moment and then you can figure out how to get it done in the playoffs. But there are also certain players that are more immune to playoff slumps because of how their game is. Remember, when you get to the playoffs, you're facing the best of the best. You can't feast on a number 5 starter. You can't feast on a borderline reliever in the major leagues. There's so many injuries in MLB these days that you do get to face, quote, minor league, AAA-ish talent at times, and that doesn't happen in the playoffs. So if there's a way to beat someone, teams will figure it out in a 7-game series. So that gives a lot of credit to guys. Also, I mean, hey, Jordan went through a period last year, right, in the playoffs where you're like, hello, what happened to you? But same thing can happen on the other end where you're like, it's impossible to get this guy out, and I would not touch him, in a tight situation if I don't have to. So yeah, I give a lot of credit to the way that this team was built and continues to build themselves. And they do focus more on the present than the future. They're able to do both, but they will make sure, in my mind, at the trade deadline, that they're not going into August without what they need to fill innings.
All right. My last point is Jordan Alvarez is batting number 5 for the All-Stars. Boo! Boo! He did not even play for the 2017 Astros. What the heck, Scott? What's going on here? I mean, is it just guilty by association? When is this going to be over? And
I think you have to stretch it out, though. I mean, they're not booing the player as much as they're booing the uniform. They've become part of the evil empire. And sure, we can talk about trash can talk, but it's not just that, guys. When you're that good, the national fan base is going to start to hate on you. So that's not a bad thing either. Of course, there's some of that, but I think most fans are pretty smart. They know that he wasn't on the team. I do think there's something to Jose Altuve not showing up to an all-star game for a really long time. It's probably not high on his list. This year was probably one of the better excuses. I saw the bruised hand that looked pretty gnarly, but he was playing through it. So it's fine. Although you can still show up. I'm big on this. Carry the sport forward. Show up. Even if you're voted and you can't play, show up. It matters. I go to the All-Star games, and the amount of fans that spend hard-earned money and their time to watch you all season long, you should be there. But I do think that's the vibe. That's the problem there, right? Anybody that's connected to the team, and then anyone that's wearing the laundry. But that was the Yankees for a long period of time, right? During their dynasty years, they'd get booed by everyone else. The Dodgers are starting to get some of those vibes just based on how they perform in off seasons and by everyone. But it's funny. We get that talk in the off season, like, because of our show, we're covering everything nationally, and the Dodgers are just scooping up players left and right. They have a ton of holes to fill. In the off season, people were like, this is so dumb. It's not fair that they get everyone. Why even play the season out? They're automatic World Series champs. Does anyone feel that way now? Has anyone seen their starting pitching injury list right now?
Oh,
It's
man,
huge.
it's
Could they win a World Series? Yes. Could they?
but, you know,
Are they favored? No, I don't think so. So that is why this game is so fun. The chance that is involved, and obviously the playoffs are different nowadays with the extra wild cards and everything else. But I do think that is some of it. So Astros fans should keep that in mind. Don't get too defensive about the specific instance in the past. Try and take pride in the amount of winning that you've done since then that causes people to be pissed off.
Well, and I'll wrap the show up on this. Growing up, I booed the heck out of the Bulls. I was from Houston. I was elated whenever Jordan took a hiatus. The Rockets won those 2 titles. I still think that they would have won the titles with Jordan in the NBA. That's my personal feeling because Hakeem Olajuwon was that good. But I watched The Last Dance with my son, and I told my son, I said, I didn't realize there were some things I totally missed. And he goes, how did you miss that? I was like, because I wrote them off because they were always winning. I was sick of hearing about the Bulls, and I didn't appreciate the greatness that was Michael Jordan as a whole. And like, that's the thing that I think when we come out of this era, whenever it ends, we're going to look back and go, holy crap, that was a lot of winning. Scott, I went to a lot of games where I paid I paid $20 for 10 games. I mean, $20 for 10 game packages for a lot of losing to watch
during the tank years.
Yeah, during the tank years. And so we've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. But yeah, you're right. With honor, we take it on. Bring it on. We are H-Town versus everyone. Where this city is resilient, it's diverse, and it is. Look, if you haven't been, come hang out with us. Come to an Astros game if you're from out of town. We'll treat you right. We will treat you right.
I've been there a million times, because before running Foul Territory the last couple seasons now, I worked for MLB and did, called games for them, called games for YouTube, called games for Facebook, did a ton of shows for MLB Network, covered them in the playoffs. Even during COVID 2020, I was in Texas when no one else was, which was kind of fun to take pictures with all of the cardboard cutouts. But yeah, I've probably been to Houston 10, 12 times in the past 6 or 7 years. And it's because of what you're talking about. So I know the Steakhouse is right around the ballpark. I am dialed into the Houston scene. We've all, like, anyone that's in national media has probably been to Houston a ton over the last decade or so. Houston,
next time you're
LA.
in town, let us know. We'll go get some Texas barbecue. Okay. How's that sound?
I will. I was close. I was in Arlington, obviously just got back last night, but absolutely we'll give you guys a heads up.
All right, so Scott, thank you for coming on once again. Go and tell us about Foul Territory. I know you just did, but
yeah, no, of course. If anyone, if you've made it here, then clearly you've enjoyed the conversation. But here's the good part: I'm the non-player. AJ Przinsky is full of fire. You probably know the name. Eric Kratz, for Astros fans, you probably know the name. I actually had one of the most viral moments in recent Astros history when he purposely fell on the orange carpet when he was, introduced, and then told that story last year. And it went super viral on TikTok with millions of views about him taking, 10 G's to fall on purpose, or whatever the number was, might have been 5. But anyway, I mean, you can look us up. There's tons of names that you probably know in baseball. We are very carefully curating our list of former players that will talk very openly and freely about the game, that watch the game every night, and that have very strong takes that cover all of the teams. So what I did was I left MLB, had a great run there, and I wanted to create what the modern version of MLB national media should look like. And that's what we do. We have a number of team-based shows as well. We have a strong partnership with Baseball America, where we run prospect shows and just did a ton of draft coverage and futures game coverage out in Arlington, Texas. So basically anything that you want on the national level is there. And then we cut everything up kind of individually. So we've talked to, half the Astros players, the ones that want to talk, and you can look up interviews on YouTube if you type in Foul Territory. But yeah, if you want to get a good listen on what's going on with the trade deadline, this is our time to shine. We have Ken Rosenthal, part of the team. He's on basically every day, either on Foul Territory or Fair Territory. And also we have a number of other national insiders. So you can check out all of our podcasts, Apple, Spotify, same thing. Wherever you get your pods, just type in Foul Territory or Fair Territory, and you'll have a good time, especially for the next few weeks.
All right. So, guys, thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day. Go ahead and subscribe to us. Go make us your first listen, Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, and we will see you tomorrow. And by the way, baseball returns to Houston. Well, actually, Seattle, and it'll be a late game, but it'll still be really baseball. Late. Yes. So thank you, Scott. Brett, we'll see you tomorrow, and go Astros.
Astros.
Thanks, guys.